Hey everybody, it's Carter Froelich. And our mission at Launch Development Finance Advisors is to be a hero to the land development and home building community. We do that through a lot of different ways, but one of the ways that I want to give back to the industry is to be able to share our experience as well as the experience of a myriad of different players in our industry, their experience, what they've learned, what they're doing, and just the knowledge that they have to provide to the industry. With that having been said, I hope you enjoy this episode. And if there's anything that we can do at launch to help you finance infrastructure, reduce costs, mitigate risk, all with the goal of enhancing project profitability and returns, please give us a call at the contact information in the show notes.
Welcome to the Land to Lots podcast, powered by Launch Development Finance Advisors. And now your host, Carter Froelich.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Land to Lots podcast. This is Carter Froelich, and today I'm really excited because we are going to be stepping beyond the traditional residential land development playbook and into the future of freight, logistics, and mobility. And you're probably thinking to yourself, how is Froelich going to do that? Well, let me tell you, we're going to get into that. Today, my guest is Ian Kinne, and he is the Vice President of Logistics, Innovation, and Investments at Hillwood. And Hillwood is the developer behind Alliance, Texas, and its mobility innovation zone. And this is all taking place in North Fort Worth, Texas. If you ever wondered how a large-scale industrial park evolves into a test bed of autonomous trucks, drones, advanced logistics, and next-generation infrastructure, while still making the transaction pencil for investors, then this conversation is going to be for you. And additionally, I heard Ian speak at the large landowner forum in San Francisco, and I was absolutely blown away. So we're going to be talking with Ian about Hillwood and what it's learning at Alliance, but more importantly, what developers and municipalities may want to consider as they move their projects from not where the market is currently, but where it's going. So with that, Ian, welcome to the show. Glad to have you.
Carter, thanks so much for having me. Really excited to be on the podcast today, and you had a great intro. Excited to talk about everything we're doing here within Alliance, Texas, and kind of Hillwood as a whole.
Well, so before we get started, Ian, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself and the path you took? Because not everybody gets to be the VP of innovation. So,
Yeah.
how did you pull that off?
You know what they say, if you're just kind of always the yes man, you might just finally get in a spot you didn't really expect. But no, I started here in Hillwood about 9 years ago. Worked in real estate before that, and then started working here. And my role here when I first started was really more in a traditional real estate transaction. So leasing, development, renewals, new leases, things like that. But mostly on office and then some industrial, but primarily office.
Okay.
And that role was good. It's a great way to learn the business, great way to learn what tenants need and how deals work. And then ultimately, just being Hillwood, and we'll get more into kind of who we are as a company later, I'm sure.
Mhm.
But we have a deep legacy in innovation, deep legacy in aviation, and a lot of work in kind of new business models. And so we were approached by Uber to be the development partner for their vertiports across North Texas. And a vertiport is essentially where they were going to land their air taxi businesses and have these hubs. And they needed
Uh-huh.
a developer to go build those. And they approached Hillwood, and being the young guy in the team, that was always up for something.
Yeah.
I jumped at the chance to start working on these vertiports, and that was a really great experience. And that was almost 10 years ago now. We started working on that. It was 2017, and so that
Mhm.
was interesting, and learned very quickly with Uber that there was a big gap in some of the fundamental kind of site selection problems that we deal with as real estate developers. And that was, first, infrastructure was key. You needed to have a lot of power in these sites, which is a story we're hearing a lot more
Yeah.
now, but
Yeah.
power was absolutely critical. But so too was population density of the right population. So you're looking at a lot of the demographic data, and then ultimately you needed to have the right airspace overlays. So that
Hmm.
having a complicated airspace with kind of the central DFW airspace here, a DFW airport, makes things challenging. So finding those right routes and those right hubs where all those things stacked up was a really interesting site selection challenge. And then we started working with an autonomous car company called Drive AI, which ultimately was sold to Apple to be kind of the basis of the Apple car. But at the time, they were an independent company, and we were working with them on a autonomous taxi service at one of our projects up in Frisco, Frisco Station. And that project ultimately ended up doing about 700 rides. And to do that, we had to do a private 5G network in partnership with AT&T.
Uh-huh.
So deploy that along um, a lot of the kind of major roadways in the area, but very similar. I mean, it was rider density, it was critical kind of nuanced infrastructure needed to be built, and then ultimately we had to take a leap of faith with a technology group. Both
Wow.
those we learned pretty early on were maybe a little early. People were not quite ready for that type of technology in their lives, and I don't think the technology at that point, quite frankly, was ready
Yeah.
for it either.
Hmm.
Um, but where it was and where we were starting to see a lot of growth and need was here in Alliance, Texas, where I work every day, and that's a 27,000 acre master plan community focused on
Hmm.
industrial and commercial logistics.
Yep.
And what better canvas and hub to really start deploying technologies in here in Alliance? So we pivoted from working with Uber and Drive AI to focusing on autonomous vehicles, drone package delivery, electric and kind of new alternative fuels, and convening all those new technologies here within Alliance, Texas. And so my day to day now is working with all these different technologies and groups, but purely focused on the movement of goods and service. I mean, and freight.
Wow.
So, a lot of autonomous trucking work, a lot of drones, eVTOLs is something very, very common as well. So, um, and ultimately my role is to go find a deal in the middle of that. So anything from a real estate transaction to a direct investment in the company to maybe standing up an operating business that supports these companies. And so
Wow.
um, I I get to do real estate still, but it's by no means the full
You-
part of my job, and it all came from saying yes one too many times, I think.
Oh,
So
oh man. Well, I'm glad you said yes to coming on the show. And you have left so many crumbs
yeah,
all over the table here that I'm going to start asking you about.
awesome, awesome,
So I'm going to go back. I'm going to go back to the beginning because our audience primarily residential folks, land developers, home builders, etc. And a lot of them may not be familiar with Alliance and the story behind Alliance and that it has its own airport, etc. So why don't we go back to the beginning a little bit? If you could just set the stage for what
yeah,
Alliance is, and then we're dig down deep into the innovation and the forward
absolutely,
thinking from its beginning till now.
yeah, of course. And when you think about Alliance history, it and the technology and the innovation we do today, I mean, we all trace it back to the Perot family.
Yep.
So many of your listeners may remember Ross Perot, especially when he ran for president, but they may remember EDS, Electronic Data Systems,
Hmm.
and ultimately
Hmm.
Perot Systems. And when he sold those two companies, the family began acquiring real estate. And the vision was essentially as Dallas had grown along I-75 and the toll road and grown north,
Hmm.
so too in time with Fort Worth. And so the family began acquiring just on a purely speculative basis large tracts of land north of Fort Worth. And so a lot of that was, wheat fields and cattle pastures and, a lot of dairies actually in this area. Um, and it's funny because I mean, I grew up in this area. I grew up maybe 15 minutes from where I currently sit right now. And
Yeah.
so it's cool full circle, but the whole area used to be completely different. And so they acquired that land north. And what really was kind of the catalyst moment for Alliance to really start and where the name Alliance comes from was actually the FAA approached the Perot family, going back to the aviation
Yep.
legacy, about building a reliever airport here. So essentially, in times of natural disasters, weather, terrorism, things like that, when planes need to come out of the sky, they need a place to land, and they didn't have an airport in this quadrant of the Metroplex, and so wanted to do an airport here. And rather than just building a standard kind of commercial airport, Mr. Perot started talking to his friends and customers at places like Raytheon and Lockheed and Bell and things like this, and saying, what kind of airport do you actually need? And they said full instrument approach, 11,000-foot runways, um, and ultimately what we built was really the first of its kind airport, and it was the world's first industrial airport, new classification with the FAA to build this, and ultimately that airport now is home. It's now the 19th busiest airport in the U.S. as far as cargo volumes goes,
Wow.
and it's no passenger travel comes through there. It's dedicated cargo, military, and general aviation, so private aviation. Why that's unique is every other airport in the top 20 in the country currently has belly freight. And so most air cargo in the US travels in the belly of your American Airlines
Yep.
plane, right
Yep.
next to your oversized bag.
Yeah.
You've got packages in there too, and that's how
Yeah.
most of it moves. So it's interesting. So that was kind of the key piece of Alliance. And then ultimately you keep going. And the next piece of infrastructure that happened in 1992 was BNSF, or at that time Santa Fe Railway, built one of the first intermodal facilities in the country. So this intermodal was taking the container
Hmm.
off the container or off the train and putting it on the chassis, and that chassis taking it to a customer's warehouse. And so that really had not been done at scale before, and that was done here. And ultimately, the vision of Alliance when it was first built was, how do you take this aviation infrastructure and build an aviation-based community. So they were going after all the aircraft manufacturers, all the different airline operators, things like that. But ultimately, what really kickstarted a lot of the industrial that we know today was actually the intermodal facility and that
Yeah.
direct connection to the West Coast ports. And so there's a lot I can go into, but today,
Yeah.
essentially, we've transformed from a land development company at that point because nobody wanted to buy our land. So we started building warehouses. And then when they said, where are my employees going to come from? You're in the middle of nowhere. We started building homes, and then we started
Yeah.
building retail. And now we build just about every asset class. The only things we haven't really built are, I think, self-storage. And I think that's it, actually. So anyway,
So, we'll talk about Hillwood, the Hillwood that I'm familiar with working, in the master plan world.
yeah.
So we have Alliance, Texas, 27,000 acres. We have a rail hub. We have an airport that is primarily air freight, 11,000 foot runway. When you got into this, what was the business plan? Meaning, we're going to be a land developer, and then it sounded like it shifted. So the current business plan, and you alluded to it earlier, I think it's still land development. I think I heard you're building and leasing. You're building and owning and leasing buildings. So what is the full spectrum of the different business segments that you're currently involved in as it relates to the greater Hillwood group of companies at Alliance?
Yeah. So I think it's important to frame up kind of how we're different because your listeners probably know at least one of our sister companies. And so
Yeah.
we all
Yep.
ultimately fall under the Perot family of companies.
Hmm.
Alliance, Texas is really where everything started. So we are the mothership that Hillwood communities can trace their roots back to
Okay.
from like the first neighborhood, Park Glen, here in Alliance. And very similarly, Hillwood Investment Properties are industrial. The industrial company you may know in Arizona or other parts of the
Hmm.
country was also birthed here in Alliance. What's different is that here in Alliance, we build on behalf of the Perot family. So
Okay.
our equity is Perot family equity. And our goal is long-term ownership and stewardship of this project. And so,
Great.
which is incredibly unique in this world. But what's great about that is it allows us to make very intentional long-term decisions for the betterment of the project. And so
Yep.
things that um, the basic question of what kind of building do I want to own in 20 years is a much different development conversation than what kind of building do I want to sell in
Yeah.
12 months when this stabilizes.
Yeah.
And so that's good, and there's no wrong or right to either one of those business models. That's just the business model that I get to work within. And it's unique because really since day one we were very our eyes were open to the importance of infrastructure in, in the deal. And so
Yep.
and to get the customers here and to get the development to actually happen, a lot of times we had to take the infrastructure development into our own hands. So we built a lot of roads, water, sewer, the classic infrastructure. We've worked a lot, and really we're kind of the original champions for public-private partnerships in the state of Texas. So
Hmm.
working a lot with for managed lanes here in the state, but also back in the dot-com boom, we placed miles and miles of dark fiber all across Alliance. We did a
Yeah.
lot of redundant power for manufacturing groups, and that making those intentional decisions have now led us to 20, 30 years later have a lot more opportunities because we, preserve pathways across all of Alliance for this kind of infrastructure. We
Yeah.
built roads from the outside in, a little bit wider, a little bit better lighting, a little better landscaping. The whole project is managed within a single association. And so all those are examples of ways that we try to preserve value. And
Yeah.
ultimately, it comes down to doing things the right way. And we've sold from time to time, but typically it's large portfolios and large chunks. And we typically don't sell land to other developers, but we will sell land to end customers, end users
Right. Right.
for more. And we've had a lot of that, especially recently with some of these more advanced manufacturing facilities that are putting just massive amounts of capex into the buildings. They need ownership. They need long-term control.
Yeah.
So that's what we
Yeah.
will do.
Thanks for that. And it sets up really well with my next question. So during the introduction, I talked about Alliance, Texas, and then a term, the Mobility Innovation Zone.
Yep.
And dealing in the world of special districts, MUDs, PIDs, MMDs, oh, a zone. It must be, yeah. Is this a special district I don't know about? So, Ian, what is the Mobility Innovation Zone, and why and how did you come to tag the project with that descriptor, if I could use
Yeah.
that?
No, that's great. And I think at the end of the day, that's what it primarily is we have taken the term mobility innovation zone and put that as essentially a marketing and branding strategy
Hmm.
across the Alliance
Yeah.
Texas platform. What that does, and I think they've kind of become synonymous as we've done this for the past few years. We've really
Hmm.
had the mobility innovation zone active now for about 6 years. Um, but what it's done is essentially it's said, we want these companies to know that when they come to Alliance, Texas, this is a place for you to innovate and commercialize mobility and supply chain
Yeah.
technologies. And so that's great. So, and we provide the canvas, like I called it earlier, of Alliance, Texas, the infrastructure, the customer base, the spokesperson in Hillwood.
Hmm.
Uh, but then also, Mobility Innovation Zone has also been taken by the city of Fort Worth, which is our largest um, area by land is within the city of Fort Worth
Hmm.
as a as an area for maximum tax abatements for qualified R&D expenses. So companies that
Hmm.
come here and choose to locate research and development operations within the Mobility Innovation Zone have the opportunity to offset up to 75% of their or qualified R&D costs through tax abatements. And so
Okay.
why that's important is, cash is king for everybody, but especially fast growth startups that burn cash very
Yeah.
quickly. And so
Yeah.
having that has been is an important part of the story.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. And we can, are there any, is the Hillwood, the Pro family utilizing any kind of special purpose taxing districts related to all this infrastructure that you're putting in? And we're going to talk about that next, other than certain tax abatements, those types of things.
So we do and we don't. So
Hmm.
we're constantly utilizing. I mean, I think every acronym you can probably throw at me right now as far as kind of ways to get infrastructure funded. But as far as the special infrastructure, we've actually taken more of the stance with all of this that um, the technology that we work with does not require special infrastructure. It
Yeah.
requires better maintained and better built conventional infrastructure
Yeah.
traditionally.
Yeah.
Um, where that is maybe a slightly nuanced is, we're doing things that maybe expand what a vehicle can do, but all of that is privately funded actually by a
Okay.
third party.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that goes back to preserving pathways and easements we've maintained throughout Alliance to kind of help make that easy. So when a
Yeah.
company says, I want to come put camera and lidar around your port area to have better autonomous vehicle safety operations, great, we have the ability to work with them on that in the city of Fort Worth
Yeah.
to make that
Yeah.
happen.
And we're gonna geek out a little bit here on the infrastructure. And so to be clear, this is an industrial. In my experience, a lot of times we carve industrial, not all the time, but sometimes out of a special purpose taxing district where we may be increasing property tax levels
Yep.
because at the end of the day, we're increasing CAM charges, which impacts NOI, which impacts the value of a building. Therefore, especially for long-term assets such as we're talking about here today, that can decrease the future value of those buildings.
Yeah.
So what I heard you say, and I just want to be clear that most of your investment by the Perot group of companies has been private, and we haven't issued any tax exempt bonds for regular infrastructure. Is that
Yeah.
a true
That's
statement?
fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair.
Okay. Got it. Got it. And so I'm just thinking of your day, Ian. So you guys, you're coming into the office, you're opening a map, you got 27,000 acres, you got an airport, you got a
Yeah.
rail hub, you've got some existing uses right now, and you've got your easements, you may have dedicated some right of way, you may have, and how are you planning the and you say we're keeping our easements large enough so that we can have a lot of creativity for things that we may not even know are going to exist yet. So are you having to, as you come down and land plan, change some of the right of way, or are you just adding to it and this is no longer working, therefore we're going to change our land plan, or we need to change the design of our infrastructure, the widths of right of way? I mean, has that really occurred, or are you so far ahead of the curve where that hasn't become an issue yet? Or could it become an issue?
I mean, it absolutely could become an issue, but we've designed Alliance since day one for
Hmm.
trucks, and within our industrial area. So what that means is really it's wider roads, it's higher
Yeah,
curbs, it's better street lighting,
yeah,
and all of those things have really made it um, much easier for these companies to really come here and operate. But also a nuance in, especially in the autonomous trucking world, is that these trucks are primarily operating on interstate. They're not operating kind of to the customer doorstep. So
so can you just say that again, just so for our listeners? So listen what Ian's going to tell everybody. So where are these autonomous trucks working?
on interstate, these guys are
Yeah, isn't that
here
amazing?
in the state
Yeah.
of Texas right now. This is my turn to geek out. In the state of Texas right now, we have probably 8 to 10 different autonomous trucking companies
Hmm.
operating on public roads every single day, of which 7 are here in DFW and 4 operate within Alliance, Texas. And
Wow.
so we have a lot of autonomous vehicles operating, and they look dang near the same as a standard truck, an 18-wheeler. The only difference is you'll see a additional amount of cameras, LiDAR, and radar on those vehicles to operate. They all are operating with safety drivers, I think,
Uh-huh.
which is an
Okay.
important distinction. I mean, I know they are, but I'm saying that I think that's an important distinction for your audience.
Okay.
Some have taken the driver out for a period of time to demonstrate they can do it. But ultimately, if one of those companies messes up, it is bad for the whole industry. So I think
Sure.
there's a little bit of a we're in this together right now. But those trucks operate from here to El Paso. That's 600 miles from Fort Worth to El Paso, and that is currently, I mean, that's a 10-hour drive,
Yeah.
and you cannot turn a driver in a single day going to El Paso and back. You can't. It's an
Yeah.
11 hours with a 24-hour drive time, federal mandate. So same thing. You can't. We have a lot of trucks that go down from Fort Worth to Laredo in the Mexico border autonomously. And it's similar. It's 8-hour drive. You can't do that with a conventional driver currently today.
Yeah.
And so what we get excited about is the long-term implications of having a deep understanding of how route planning can change with autonomous trucking. And so if your current supply chain is built on a 9 to 11 hour drive time with kind of your max radius out of your warehouse,
Yeah.
how does that change when the only limiting factor is the amount of diesel in your tank? It's not
Wow.
it's not federally mandated drive times, but it's actually the 1,200 miles you can go in a single tank of diesel. It's really pretty interesting, and that's where I kind of get excited. You start to think about,
Yeah.
is there a place in the middle of Iowa that becomes, the hotbed for supply chain in the future, Alliance, Texas, because it's fed through autonomous vehicles that don't get tired, don't get distracted, and don't get hungry and pull over. So
Yeah.
anyway,
So no, and that's real interesting. So we hear about AI. AI is going to replace all the white collar workers. The actors. Yeah, really interesting. So this is kind of the AI discussion as it relates to logistics. What has the federal government been realizing that, with these new technologies, some of our rules and regulations may be outdated and we need to revisit those? And are they willing to look at that? And where are they in okay, autonomous trucks, we're going to let it go from, in this instance, Alliance to El Paso, turn around and come back as quickly as you can. We feel comfortable with that. How far away or how close are we to that type of regulation change that would allow logistics companies to do that?
So autonomous vehicle regulations are mandated state by state.
Okay.
And so 26 states out of the 50 have autonomous vehicle statutes in place.
Okay.
And so what that is, why that's important is every state is different. And so what you can do, and that's why so many companies have chosen to be here in Texas, is because you can do
Yeah.
600 miles in a single state,
Yeah.
and you can prove the value proposition to a customer while
Mhm.
never having to leave and enter into a different regulatory area. So that's a very key distinction. And so there's been a lot of push from the trucking companies and others for a unified federal framework.
Sure. Makes
We were
sense.
actually
Mhm.
fortunate to host Secretary Duffy to speak about this a few months ago, which I think is really important.
Yeah.
They're engaged from the highest levels to figure out how do they do this in the right way, because obviously there are a lot of stakeholders that have opinions on this, which is it's good and it's important to hear all of those. Um, and then ultimately, they're also working on a lot of the drone and eVTOL regulation as well, and so that's
Yeah.
also been even more localized than the state level, and that is important because you've seen a just mass proliferation of drones really over the past 2 to 3 years, and the big catalyst there was actually really the Russia-Ukraine war,
Yeah.
and the use of drones has really shown that there is a lot more you can do with a drone than what we have typically done, which is take pictures of our house.
Right.
And you start to, so you do that. And I would say the second biggest thing that happened for drones in the past few years is really Walmart's decision to start to utilize drones because you look at kind of how supply chains have evolved over the past decade, and so many companies were playing catch up to Amazon. And now Walmart is in the leading position on one of these new innovative technologies, and that is drone deliveries. And Walmart has chosen DFW to be their hub for new technology deployments. And that's not just mobility, but that is
Yeah.
healthcare. And that is, obviously mobility, but that is also new grocery concepts and things like that. So
Yeah.
what that does for us is there's 8 million people here in DFW. It's if we were a state, we'd be the same size as, or we'd be right bigger than Washington and just a little bit smaller than Virginia.
Mhm.
But we're within one area.
Yeah.
We're 100 miles east-west and 14 counties. And so it's a rambling answer to say that the whole industry is changing very quickly
Yeah.
right now, and you have an administration that is very openly trying to reduce the regulatory burden.
Yeah.
But we also, as industry, need to do things in the methodical and
Right.
safe way, where because ultimately, at the end of the day, if something happens, this
Yeah.
whole industry can fall.
Yeah. Now, and so I'm gonna go back and then I'm gonna go forward. So because we'll start talking about the drones.
It's fine. No, it's fine.
So we've
Fine.
got a truck. We've got a truck. It can go all the way to El Paso, and let's say it's an autonomous. Can it then drive into New Mexico and make its way to Arizona to all the way to California, or all of a sudden New Mexico says no more, no autonomous trucks? And thus the need for the last time I checked, we had 50 states. We only got 26 that say we
Yeah.
can do that. So, I mean, how are and I'll be happy to stand on the soapbox, but that doesn't really help us as a country to become more innovative if we're
No.
all not collaboratively working together. Thus, we need we'll cut Hawaii out of it.
Yeah.
We don't have, but you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
and maybe Canada, but it would sure be nice to be able to drive autonomous trucks to create the productivity of our country to bring it to another level. And this
Well,
isn't a labor comment either about
no.
truck drivers, but
And that, I mean, there's a few things in there I can talk about. So one is the labor challenge is a key part of this. I mean,
Yeah.
the average age of a trucker in the U.S. is increasing quite
Yeah.
rapidly.
Hmm.
And you've also seen a lot of focus recently on the foreign-born CDL exemptions that have been
Yeah.
given. I mean, obviously Minnesota's been in the news a lot with that. Florida, Texas is also one of the worst
Hmm.
actors in that, and so there will absolutely be a labor crunch in this industry.
Hmm.
It's not a matter of if, but when. And
Hmm.
so you think about where you have drivers available today, and it's a lot of those local delivery routes where I can operate a 10-hour day like a
Yeah.
normal person. I can drive deliveries across an
Yeah.
area like DFW, be a human, interact
Yeah.
with a customer, sign
Yeah.
paperwork, to make deliveries, and ultimately come home at night. That's a
Yeah.
great livelihood and a great job for a
Yeah.
lot of people in this
Good
country.
point. Yeah.
But you know what's terrible is being away from my family, being away from my home for weeks on end as an over-the-road trucker. That is a tough life.
Yeah.
But people have made that decision to do that life because historically the pay has been, better than being
Mhm.
local, and
Yeah.
it's a different type of life that some people like. That's
Yeah.
okay. And that role will be there because I think autonomous vehicles will not be good at a lot of lanes for a long time.
Yeah.
It's very hard to drive an autonomous truck across Wyoming in the winter. That's just a
Yeah.
fact. Wind, and I'm not saying
Yeah.
that because it's cold, it's because the
I'm
wind.
from North Dakota. Yeah.
You get it.
Originally,
Yeah,
I know what it's
exactly.
like.
Yeah. You know what it's like. But the other thing on that, your first kind of point about the regulatory environment. No, it's different from Texas to New Mexico to Arizona.
Yeah.
Arizona is actually the closest, I would say, in the leading position to Texas. There's been a lot of great
Yeah.
traction. I mean, the Waymo effect is real. People
Sure.
getting
Yeah.
to ride in autonomous vehicles like a Waymo um, has dramatically helped the industry.
Yeah.
People see them every day on their streets. They understand, the pros and cons. And a Waymo and a Tesla is not an autonomous truck. An autonomous truck is
Mhm.
significantly smarter and better equipped, but also
Yeah.
there's a much higher stakes game they're playing. And
Yeah.
so that's important to make the distinction of. But um, there's a lot of companies that were trying to go from DFW to El Paso to Phoenix
Yeah.
with the hope that New Mexico would eventually fall in line with the other two states as far as regulatory framework, and then California would so too. California, as you know, there's so much freight that comes in and out of California from the
Yeah.
ports, but also for autonomous vehicles, you think about how much produce comes out of kind of the Central Valley of
Yeah.
California to the rest of the country. I mean, that is time sensitive cargo that is typically team freight. That is
Right.
expensive freight. And so you think about how that could evolve over time with having more of this over the road autonomous. It's super exciting to me. Um, but California has been very adamant that they're not looking at autonomous trucks right now. And so that has completely changed. And so a lot
Yeah.
of companies now are going from DFW to Atlanta because there's a
Mhm.
more direct route to get
Yeah.
to Atlanta in a better regulatory environment. It's just interesting. If you follow it like I do, it's good to know. And
Yeah.
then finally, the last thing I'd say, because you mentioned Canada, the largest autonomous vehicle commercial deployment right now in North America is actually in Canada, not Texas, not any of these other
Really.
places I mentioned.
Yeah.
Is for Loblaws in Canada, working with Gatik. So Loblaws announced a 50 truck autonomous vehicle rollout with significantly more in the pipe.
Uh-huh.
And those are autonomous box trucks that are servicing their stores across Ontario. So really,
Wow.
really
Good.
very cool to kind of see because historically the flack on autonomous is like, this ice, the snow,
Yeah.
all that. And so to prove it up there is a really big deal for all of this. So anyway,
Yeah. Oh, that's good. Okay, now we're gonna get our wings on and we're gonna go from the pavement and we're gonna start flying. So you talked that Walmart is taking the lead, if you will, with some of their drone. Obviously, the war in Ukraine has completely changed everything. And during your talk in San Francisco, you showed, I think, was it a helicopter area at one
VTOL.
point that's now turned into a
Oh
drone port?
yes, our flight test center. We have a flight test center.
Yeah, but so you're really involved in this,
Yep.
and obviously it's a great the Metroplex is 100 miles. We've got 8 million people in an area. What a great place to test this technology.
Yep.
What is the current state, and we're recording this at the end of 25 as it relates to drones and their ability to increase productivity and what that means for Alliance and why you're really kind of the test bed of this, at least one that I'm aware of anyway.
Yeah. So you look at a company like Google Wing, so owned by Alphabet. Wing is the drone delivery, the kind of the largest drone delivery partner for Walmart. We worked with them for about a year and a half before they were publicly announced with Walmart here in DFW to help get them accustomed to North Texas. And so that was proving use cases, doing deliveries to our single family communities, Fred's team and
Yep.
at Harvest and Pecan Square, doing drone deliveries up there, working with another drone operator to show how two drones in the same airspace at the same time can both deliver packages and deconflict and talk to each other. Which, when you think about, you know, in the U.S. right now, FAA really there's no unified framework for how you deal with drones. So the FAA is working with the private sector to really define how this airspace has to interact. But ultimately, 400 AG or 400 AGL and below. I mean that historically has been kind of not part of the FAA.
Mhm.
And so working with private sector to kind of talk back and forth is super important. And then ultimately working with Wing to launch with Walmart, and they're now servicing 2.6. They're able to service 2.7 million homes from their existing locations in DFW alone currently. And so that
Wow.
is they're putting these drone delivery pads essentially right near where you do like your curbside, Walmart pickup, and they're doing these drone delivery pads on, in a very basic kind of, light upfit infrastructure. But what's important and where Walmart has a really strategic edge over like even an Amazon in this is that you look at the store density they have between their neighborhood markets and their actual kind of super centers, and they're able to really service most of the I think it's like 90% of the country within a 10-minute drive time. And so
Yeah.
you look
Wow.
at how much of the country can really be serviced via drone when you have a 5 to 10 mile radius, and it's actually pretty incredible what you can do and how fast you can do it, and that just direct low power use. And the kind of the core thesis was, you shouldn't need a half-ton car to deliver a half-ton cheeseburger to your house. It could be a really small and simple.
Yeah.
Uh, it gets there faster, so your food's still hot. I mean, that's a
Yeah.
kind of, as a millennial, I get excited about that, and I think some of the older generation might roll their eyes, but it kind of fundamentally can change a lot of the way that we consume
Yeah.
products. And I think you could point to a lot of things, but ultimately it's the e-commerce effect. And it's
Yeah.
everybody expects things now. We expect things within 2 hours or less sometimes, which
Right.
is wild when you think about just how a supply chain works. Inventory system to know to bring it off a shelf, put it into a bin, put it into a box, and get it to my door within 2 hours is
Yeah.
honestly a modern marvel. And so
So-
you've got that. And then the city of Fort Worth was awarded the Center for Advanced Aviation Technologies through Texas A&M. And that's a $150 million grant to bring advanced aviation technology here to the city of Fort Worth and those partners to come ultimately commercialize that tech. So you talk about how it's funded.
Yeah.
Some of this has been grant as well. And there's actually two more grants we can talk about, but that's been part of it as well.
Yeah. And so we've got all of these different, I mean, you guys are doing things, the companies that are located at Alliance are doing things that take a lot of coordination with the public sector, the
Yeah.
FAA, departments of transportation, all of this. And and we as land developers and our clients, and I'm preaching to the choir here, but we have to work collaboratively with the jurisdictions,
Yep.
and some are easier to work with than others. What lessons have you learned as it relates to dealing with both the feds, the county, the state, local governments on best practices? And I'm going to leave it very, very
Yeah.
broad as it relates to creating collaborative win-win relationships, not just for the developer, for the public sector, but for the community and the area as a whole.
I would say it starts with awareness, and I think
Mhm.
that's it seems like a simple thing, but so many. I mean, we talk about how many people probably listening to this maybe don't know a lot of this or aren't familiar with any of these technologies, but you're your local representative, your local fire department, police department, I mean, they're people too. I mean, they're doing their day-to-day jobs and they don't know how to interact with a lot of this. So I think we've done a
Hmm.
lot of demo days with our customers. We've done a lot of show and tell kind of demonstrations.
Yeah.
We worked very proactively with police and fire to kind of just notify them. Like, technically you don't have to,
Yeah.
man, you really should. So that's one. And then on the, really on the kind of broader side, it's, the public-private partnership model and really a lot of the grants we've been able to
Hmm.
to work with. It's ultimately about showing how public and private sector are able to work together for a common goal. And
Hmm.
what is the broader benefit of an investment? I think that's ultimately a lot of elected officials are trying to find wins where they can.
Hmm.
Um, we're trying to all bring new jobs, we're trying to bring
Sure.
technology, and make investments that are durable. I think at the end of the day,
Yeah.
and that's where I think you go back to kind of what special infrastructure have you done. My answer was probably a little more boring than you might expect, but we're very hesitant to build hyper specialized
Yeah.
infrastructure
Yeah.
for this technology. And I think so many of these technologies are so used to that answer now, where when someone asks them, what do you need? Like, what can I go build you to make this happen? And it's, I just need less potholes in the roads. I need better striping and better lighting.
Yeah. Yeah.
And man, if you could have a great integration system with the local helicopters on the drones, then I think would be pretty good.
Yeah.
And ultimately, what really drives a lot of this too is just the community wanting these things to be there, asking for them, being curious.
Yeah.
Because we did a demo day up at one of our communities in Frisco, and we're working with these drones, and this lady was very upset about drones coming to the community and
Yeah. Yeah.
how loud they were going to be in a nuisance. And we had been doing some demonstrations all day in the park, and ultimately it was she was talking to a colleague of mine, and he said, look up. And right above her, this whole time they've been yelling, or she'd been yelling at him, was a drone hovering, 10, 15, 20 feet above her. And she hadn't,
Couldn't hear
hadn't,
it.
hadn't even thought about it. And so,
Yeah.
I mean, there is a noise associated with those things, but
Yeah.
ultimately, there's noise with cars, and there's a lot more, if a
Yeah.
car hits a kid, it's a big deal. And
Yeah.
so, as a father, I start to think about that too. Is I don't want any more Amazon vans driving through my neighborhood sometimes.
Yeah. 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 There's a lot of them.
Yeah.
And have you gotten any pushback from the area? Because I look at Alliance as and we said earlier, a test bed of innovation.
Yeah.
Uh, but this started many, many years ago with that vision continues to evolve as technology evolves. But have you been there so long right now where you have the trust of the community going, where they're going, hey, have you seen what those guys are doing up at Alliance now? They got this crazy thing. You,
Yeah.
you, you don't hear that anymore, or did you even hear it? I
Yeah.
don't know. Yeah.
So at the end of the day, Alliance, Texas is part of 2 counties, 5 school districts, and
Yeah.
7 cities and towns. And
Yeah.
so you think about the number of just constituents and stakeholders that we have to work with, that we get to
Yeah.
work with, I should say, not have to get to work with, is pretty remarkable.
Yeah.
Um, everyone's got a different opinion. Everyone's got a different level of excitement, and um, I think the way that we have articulated it and been successful is that we are working with these companies to do it the right way.
Yeah.
And we want the right way to be shown
Yep.
here rather than being reactive when it happens somewhere else and they just
Exactly.
decide to put their foot down.
Yep.
We want to work with them. And I think what you go back to kind of the quality of what we build historically is readily evident every single day you drive through Alliance. You should not drive through Alliance and think you're anywhere else in the country. It should feel very unique and
Yeah.
intentional. And so I think the proof is a little bit in the pudding with that. I mean, I
Sure.
think there's been groups that have seen us for decades operate in the right way. And I think ultimately there's a level of optimism that this will bring. Our goal with all of this is we want these groups to decide to set up major campuses here, to build offices, to build manufacturing,
Hmm.
to do R&D facilities here, broader than just operations, because ultimately those are the sticky jobs that build the
Yeah.
networks that fill all of our warehouses out here. Is when we get good manufacturing users. So um, I think it's a little bit of we're all rowing the boat together.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? And
Good point.
the city of Fort Worth especially is, really intentional about kind of the image that they're curating
Yeah.
with trying to attract best in class companies. And so to
Yeah.
have an initiative like the Mobility Innovation Zone where companies have chosen to be here because of the infrastructure and because of the what quality of life is here for their employees and
Yeah.
it, it's a natural story that fits well into this kind of next generation manufacturing attraction they're trying to do. So
Right.
all that to be said is it's really more of a partnership, across multiple stakeholders at the end of the day. But you got to be open, honest,
Yeah.
candid, kind of the
Yeah.
ROI from the get go.
Has there ever been a user or potential tenant or a site a pad buyer that's come to you all and you just said, oh, this probably isn't a good fit for whatever
Yes.
reason?
Yeah.
Could
So
could you give
there's
an example of the wrong fit tenant partner?
yeah. So not to get wordy again, but in 2017, the state of Texas passed really kind of the initial Senate bill that enabled autonomous vehicles to operate here in the state of Texas, and it prohibited municipalities from putting their own legislation on top of the state. And
Uh-huh.
so the state said, up as long as you're licensed and insured, you can operate autonomous vehicle on Texas roads here in the state of Texas. Great. What happened was, and this happened in the past year, was in 2025. They put additional language in there that essentially eliminated the ability they and introduced a permitting standard that all companies have to now go through, which is
Uh-huh.
great, and that made penalties also for bad actors. So
Okay.
groups that
Yep.
don't operate safely, don't pass inspections, don't
Yep.
work with the Department of Motor Vehicles and public safety on these issues, and so that's great. Why I say all that is we did have a company that's a bad actor, and we worked with them for a little bit. And ultimately, there were some things that they were asking us to do we just weren't comfortable with,
Yeah. Yeah.
and we were able to kind of articulate why we weren't comfortable with those. And um, I think we also had a group where we did a build to suit for them. They were an autonomous trucking company. We did a build to suit for them. They had a very large change in leadership that involved a lot of foreign issues, you could
Uh-huh.
say. All this is public, and we ultimately decided they were no longer a good tenant. We were able to negotiate a buyout of their lease,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and ultimately it worked out well for all parties. They ended up retreating to China a few years, a year later, and for us, we
Yeah.
were able to building back and release it to a solid tenant. And so
Yeah.
it's the answer is, there are bad actors in this, and
Yeah.
I think ultimately I'm kind of the shield at the end of the day, kind of
Yeah.
working with these companies, but by working by having done this as long as we have, which may not seem like a long time for people that have been in the land development business for decades, but in the world of technology, working in autonomy for the past 8 years is
Yeah.
actually a lot.
Yeah.
Um, we
Yes.
we have some really good people we can talk to that say, don't talk to that company, or these guys are legit, and you
Yeah.
kind of,
Yeah.
and then we'll do our own independent fact finding too.
Right. Right. That's good. As you look forward and God only knows what's coming. I mean, you're in it all the time. You see these things. I mean, for an outsider like me, I don't know what's coming around the corner. But what I've heard you say as it relates to the infrastructure you're building, yeah, how do I say this? Larger infrastructure, more flexible infrastructure. It's bigger, it's
Yep.
wider, yeah, but it's done right, one time right. Is there anything that you see on the horizon that may change you to alter the way you've been doing things, just as it relates to putting infrastructure on the ground?
As it relates to infrastructure, the last 35 years of Alliance Texas, so we started in 1989
Yeah,
with Alliance Texas, and um, the last 30, I guess, what is that, 36 years, about 37,
yeah,
has really been based on providing
yep,
quality roads, water, sewer, and maintaining pathways. Great.
yep,
The next 35 years will be more of that to an even greater degree.
hmm,
But layer on top of that, being very intentional about access, being very intentional about your data connectivity as well,
yep,
and ultimately your airspace as well. And so there's kind of those three things. But here in the state of Texas, probably like many of the places around the country, power is
Yep.
absolutely critical right now.
Yep.
And Alliance has been designed since day one, really for manufacturing users. So
Yep.
we've got three different power providers here in Alliance, Texas. We have multiple parts of the Alliance project that are um, dual serve, dual feed,
Yep.
um, redundant fiber, and so that's really great for manufacturing customer, but it's also really good for a data center.
Sure.
And so
Yep.
having to manage, you know, long term versus kind of a deal in hand versus potential deals in the future, and kind of how you
Yep.
manage um, resources you have, and how are you a steward of that for long term value and ultimately job creation out here in Alliance.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think that's critical. Um, and so I think when you really look into the future, is kind of what's going to change. I don't think anyone can predict it. I mean, I
Yeah.
think what I do today, I I mean, no, I would never have predicted
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
And I mean, I have enough humility to say that, I think, but um, I think that excites me, and I think
Yeah. Yeah.
talk to a lot of groups. It's, well, how do you plan the workforce of tomorrow if you don't even know where your company is going to be in a couple of years? And it's the
Yeah.
answer is, I can't tell you that because I don't
Mhm.
know it. But what I
Yeah.
can say is it's more important than ever to be nimble and curious. And
Yeah.
so that's all I can ask for in my career is be nimble and curious,
Yeah.
and don't be
Great
afraid
advice. Yep. For
of
everyone.
being curious. So yeah,
And so just to touch on power if all these data centers get built, that everybody wants to build, I mean, there's not enough power.
no,
But is Alliance set up currently to be able, given its current pace, to be able to supply all the power for the next foreseeable future, whatever your definition of foreseeable future is? And the second question, are you starting to look at maybe doing your own? And here again, I know nothing about the power sources at Alliance,
yeah,
but we do see a lot of conversations right now about micro reactors, and some of the big, the Googles of the world come in and how are you going to get us power? How are you going to get us power? That kind of thing. So it's a big issue. There's a lot there for you to digest and respond to, but
yeah.
what are your thoughts on that?
The I mean, look at kind of what industrial real estate has done. Historically, your decision making was built on location, labor, and cost.
Hmm.
And you look at another criteria when sites are being quickly eliminated because they don't have enough power at the site. And so when you
Yeah.
think about how ultimately site selection, I started this whole conversation
Yeah.
off with the critical site selection, how nuanced it was.
Yeah.
A lot of those things aren't really very nuanced anymore. I mean, you just kind of, as a kind of basic fundamental, you have to have a certain threshold of power, and that's different for every user.
Sure.
Um, so I think that's important. As far as Alliance, we worked very closely with our power providers on long-term planning.
Hmm.
And so you talk about future substations, future power capacity. And then the state of Texas, really pre-COVID, and really coming out of COVID, um, did a lot of investment, and a lot of this was in the Biden administration, a lot of investment
Hmm.
in renewable energy. So solar and wind, we are the by far the largest renewable energy producing state in the country. About 35% of our grid energy comes from renewables.
Hmm.
And you may not know that
I didn't know
because
that. I did not know that. Yeah.
Texas is known for oil and gas, but
Yeah.
you drive out west of here, you're going to see a lot of nodding donkeys and a lot of wind turbines and a lot of it's and it's and that's a
Yeah.
issue, I think, at the state level, is that you have all this power coming from the west into the east.
Yeah.
Where the water is, west is where the power is. And you have
Yeah.
all this transmission coming in, transmission lines. There's ultimately not enough transmission capacity to get that into the population centers. And
Sure.
so there's a big focus on, to your point, kind of these SMRs, so small modular reactors. There's a
Yeah.
lot on kind of local power production, batteries, generation, but ultimately DFW and the most of the 14 county area falls within an air non-attainment zone. So we can't do on-site natural gas production. For the most part, we can't do any more coal. And so you have
Okay.
to think
Yeah.
of clean energy solutions. And ultimately, we've looked at just about everything from solar to wind to our
Yeah.
own reactors. And I think we're much further along with that than we ever have been. And a lot of that is just driven by all of this demand for power is dramatically increasing the cost of power to the everyday consumer. That is
Yep.
just a fact. And
Yep.
that will continue to increase, and to a point where maybe some of these projects finally start to pencil.
Sure.
Um,
Yeah.
but you don't want to buy all your solar panels from China. You
Yeah.
want to, have a lot of American made, there has to be a new supply chain built that supports that. And a lot of that traditionally has not been done here in the US. So
Yeah.
it's a much more complicated question, but at the end of the day, there's not enough power. And you have to be very intentional about the projects you do and don't do.
Yeah.
So,
No, that's great. That's great. I've taken up about an hour of your time. I could keep on going. Then and I'm going to end with a finale here. We're going to
okay,
talk about dollars and cents. So,
right.
and you may or may not be able to answer this, but one of the things that I really enjoy about working with Hillwood and what I've seen you guys do and continue to do, you're always doing the right thing. It's one time right. Yeah, we're going to spend the money up front. We are long-term developers with a long-term vision. We're spending gobs of money. We're building an airport. We're working with the railroad to bring in the hubs. We're building bigger infrastructure with greater easements. We're putting in all of the fiber and the electrical that we need to. Big costs up front. How have you seen that value creation, meaning putting in the big infrastructure in advance of there being a real return? For having a vision for which there may not be, yeah, everybody else is going, what are these guys doing?
Yeah.
I mean, how has the 35 years of alliance or whatever it's been, how has that investment, that vision compounded into return, both economic and, there's lots of ways that developers and industries can be repaid, but through contributions, through politics, through regional impact. But I'm just curious to get your thoughts on what have been the returns of this vision as you see it, the family sees it, as the various companies see it, as it relates to Alliance.
I think you should ask that question to our 590 different companies that choose to call Alliance home. I think that's who you should ask.
Yeah,
But I will say, since the origination of Alliance Texas, we have a cumulative economic impact of over $130 billion dollars.
yeah. Wow.
Region.
Hmm.
We track that every single year. We do that report for all of our public
Yeah,
sector. Why that's important is that's based off of $16 billion dollars of investment. We have $130 billion economic impact.
yeah,
So almost a 10x.
yeah,
And
yeah,
so that's pretty remarkable when you think about just what we're talking about here. At the end of
yeah,
the day, we're talking about a lot of 66,000 jobs, irreplaceable infrastructure, and ultimately, a great place to live for all
yeah,
these people,
yep,
where we have master planned industrial sectors that can cohabitate with quiet residential streets and good retail and walkable and great schools. All
yep,
of that within a 20-mile radius of each other, in a place that our employees and my coworkers choose to raise their families. I think
yeah,
that at the end of the day is a story we try to tell. We try to
yeah,
curate that. There are dollars and cents, and there's actually an ROI. And you could also talk about the deals we have won because we are building
yeah,
infrastructure speculatively, because we build before there's a deal. We're able to be more nimble
yeah,
and ultimately be, when a customer says, I need to go fast, we say, how fast?
yeah. Here's the
We can
site.
do it.
Yeah,
Let's go.
build here. Yeah,
Um, and that's not just for our kind of core business, that's for all of our businesses. It's how can we better serve the customer, beyond just, here's the lease rate and here's the building square footage.
yeah, yeah. That's great. Ian, thank you. Yeah, before we end, is there a question I should have asked you that I didn't, that you would like to have the audience know about? I know we covered a lot, but I just want to give you the mic. Here you go.
I'm trying to think. I mean, I don't think I have any off the top of my head, that you didn't ask me. So, maybe we can think of one after the fact and come back and do a little,
Okay. Okay.
little QR.
So in the show notes for everybody, I'm going to put. Do you mind if I put your contact information
Please,
if
that's
you
fine.
if you want to get in touch with Ian? also put the website for Alliance. Are there any videos or YouTubes or anything that you guys have that you might want to be able to share with me about some of the cool things that are going on? And this is more of a question. I don't know if there is such a thing, and but if there are, I would love to be able to show resources to those that are interested in the very forward-thinking things that you're doing at Alliance.
Yeah, and if you want to know more about the specific mobility innovation zone initiatives, I'd encourage you to check out alliancetexasmiz.com. And then just for our standard Alliance, and that's MIZ, Miz. And for
Mhm.
our broader just Alliance Texas information, alliancetexas.com. And we've got great videos on there, a lot of great photography capabilities, white papers, everything you can need. And then ultimately, I'm happy to be a resource. I can't pretend to know everything, so I'd love to connect with people that are engaged in this and curious, and ultimately, hopefully, I can be helpful and learn something from them too.
Great. Ian, thank you very much for taking the time. And for all of our listeners, if you've enjoyed this podcast, I encourage you to share it with your coworkers. Until next time, have a nice day.
You have been listening to the Land to Lots podcast with Carter Froelich. Follow us wherever you find your podcast to never miss a new episode.